Hello and welcome to a very special episode of To The Point. My guest today is someone the country has been waiting to hear for over a year, but without any luck. Today, however, he's decided to break his silence and speak about APJ Abdul Kalam, the president he served as Prime Minister for 3 years from 2004 to 2007. I'm talking, of course, about former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh. Dr. Manmohan Singh, Dr. Abdul Kalam was perhaps one of the most popular presidents India has had. You and before you, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, were the two men who served as his prime ministers. How do you remember Dr. Kalam?
Karan, I knew Dr. Kalam long before he became the President of India. Way back in the late 70s, I was a member of the Space Commission, and his work in space technologies and the development in the space program was phenomenal. Then I also worked with him when he was chief of the DRDO and I was the finance minister. His contribution to the development of self-reliance in defense technology was phenomenal. And I used to see him sometime at very odd hours carrying a file to me and saying, Prime Finance Minister, you have to sign it. Now, those were the days in which I think trust mattered a great deal. And if Kalam said so, I did put my signature to many projects that were under implementation.
So, in fact, you had an association with Dr. Kalam that goes back more than 25 years to the 70s.
That's quite correct. But when he became president, I served him as the Prime Minister for more than 3 years. And he was the one who administered me the oath of office and secrecy. And my relationship with him was that of great friendship. And he recognized the problems that I had in managing a difficult coalition government, but I received utmost cooperation from him in discharging my responsibilities as the Prime Minister. And I will recount only 2 cases where his involvement in our development program was a very crucial element in the development of those areas. Dr. Kalam and I used to discuss very often the prospect of India, the long-term vision that needs to be developed, and how India can emerge out of its backwardness to become a first-ranking developed economy. And it is in that context that I used to discuss with him issues regarding development of our country. And in particular, he was greatly interested in developing rural areas on the basis of modern technology, using science and technology as an instrument of development was a passion with him which I shared. And we used to have many discussions on these issues. And yet another important issue that came before our government was the familiar nuclear deal with the United States. I took the precaution of keeping the president fully in the picture at various stages of negotiations. I used to brief him, and I was very happy when he endorsed what we were doing. Of course, when I faced a vote of no confidence in Parliament, he was no longer the president, but even then he played a very important role in helping the deal to go forward. That time, there was a problem with regard to the voting pattern, how will it go? The prospects of the government winning the vote of confidence were being questioned, And I was discussing these matters with Amar Singh ji, also with Mulayam Singh ji, and with great difficulty, we managed to persuade them to re-look at their objection. And it occurred to me that Mulayam Singh ji had great regard and respect for Dr. Kalam. So I suggested then to Amar Singh ji, maybe if you don't believe my word, you might like to hear Abdul Kalam. And they went to see Abdul Kalam, and he told them this deal is in national interest, and that means that the Samajwadi Party was on board and we won the vote of confidence.
I'm fascinated by what you tell me about Dr. Kalam and the nuclear deal, because as a scientist and as someone who was closely associated with Pokhran, he would have both understood the importance and the significance. He gave you a lot of personal encouragement and a lot of support during those early days of the deal when you faced opposition, not just from the opposition, but sometimes even from people within your own party.
Well, there was opposition within the scientific community also. And the fact that Dr. Kalam was on board was a great source of encouragement to me to go forward.
Did you have to ask him to give people his advice and suggestions, or did he volunteer to do it himself?
As far as the relationship between the Prime Minister and the President is concerned, I used to keep him fully informed of major developments that were taking place. And at times, he did want to know more, and I was very glad to provide him that material whenever he wanted it. And that fostered a relationship of trust and confidence between the two of us. So I never had either an acrimonious moment in my dealings with Dr. Kalam for the 3 years that I served under him as Prime Minister.
Now, he was in fact India's first truly non-political president. I get the impression that despite that, he was curious and deeply interested in political matters, particularly governmental and developmental. Am I right?
Well, development issues were a great, I think, passion for him. And he has written many books. The use of technology as an instrument of development, the 2020 vision, which he used to talk about a great deal. He was very keen that I should have the planning document reflect some of his thinking, particularly with regard to the development of rural areas. We did that to the extent we could. Overall, he was enormously interested in the future of our country as a mature, developed nation.
Now, as you watched him during the 3 years when you were his Prime Minister, did you ever feel that his non-political background actually helped him perform the functions of a president? Or were there moments when perhaps it was a bit of a handicap because he was an unusual, unique sort of president?
I didn't feel that was a handicap. I think his personality was endearing personality. People respected him for his frankness, for his sincerity, for his simplicity, for his straightforwardness. I didn't get a feeling that he was at a loss in any area because he came from a non-political background.
And he didn't hesitate as president to give you advice, to make suggestions. He felt quite free to share his thinking with the Prime Minister and even suggest what you should do.
Well, by and large, it was a very harmonious relationship. I never felt that we had a president who was not on the same wavelength as our government was.
Now, he was, of course, as you said a moment ago, the president who swore you in. It was Dr. Kalam who made you Prime Minister with that swearing-in oath in Rashtrapati Bhavan. At the time, there was a lot of speculation in the papers that he had a reservation or hesitation about making Sonia Gandhi Prime Minister. When you met him together on the 18th of May 2004, what happened at that meeting?
I think this is a canard which is being spread. There's no truth in that. Kalam never questioned who will be the person who will swear in. That was a privilege that was given under our constitution to the to the party or to the person who claimed majority support, and anything that is said on that area, I think, would not be true. These canard that is being spread, that he had hesitation in swearing in Mrs. Gandhi, that issue is never discussed in my presence.
Because, as you know, emails were being exchanged, messages were being sent on the internet claiming that Dr. Kalam had asked for Mrs. Gandhi's passport, that he'd asked for other information and details to prove she was Indian. That's all rubbish.
Not to my knowledge.
It's all rubbish.
Not, it is all rubbish.
Was he surprised when Mrs. Gandhi said to him on the 18th of May 2004, I don't want to be Prime Minister, I want Dr. Manmohan Singh instead?
Well, I think this thing was going in for 3-4 days before swearing in. So he got to know of the developments in the Congress party, the developments in the UPA, and therefore it didn't come to him as a surprise.
Now, one of the things he writes about in his book, Turning Points, is how when the Office of Prophet Bill was sent to him by Parliament.
Discuss what happened between the President and the Prime Minister. I think I am sworn to secrecy, but beyond that, I wouldn't like to go.
Can I ask you one question? And I won't trespass at all into the relationship between the President and Prime Minister. But on issues like the Office of Prophet, would he have felt that he had the strength, that he had the opportunity to advise his Prime Minister, to make suggestions, and would you have valued those suggestions?
That option is open to all presidents to advise the Prime Minister. But it's also a fact that under our constitutional things, if a particular bill is returned, if Cabinet submits that bill with the same recommendation, the President has no choice.
Quite right. So he can give advice once, but after that he has to accept what the Prime Minister wants. He was also the President in 2005 who, at your suggestion and request, dissolved the Bihar Assembly, and subsequently the Supreme Court struck that down as unconstitutional. In his book, Turning Points, he says that at that point he thought his conscience was telling him he should resign, but you persuaded him not to. Do you remember what you said to him at that time?
Well, he was in Moscow at that time. I rang him and we had a very good conversation. He expressed some of his doubts, but ultimately you know what happened.
And when the Supreme Court struck it down, he says in his book that he wanted to resign, but he was persuaded by you to reconsider.
Of course, as I said, what goes on between the President and the Prime Minister cannot be allowed to become public property. But whatever matters came before me, I had the full confidence that the President will apply his mind as best as he can before coming to any different conclusion.
But there's also something else that he seems to be revealing, which is that he felt close enough to you to share with you not just his thinking, but what his conscience was saying to him, and then close enough to you to be advised against his first instinct and what his conscience had said. There was a closeness between you which people outside didn't realize.
No, I had excellent relationship with President Kalam. He trusted me. I respected him enormously, and this relationship was a relationship of which I was a great beneficiary.
He stopped being president in 2007 when you were still Prime Minister. You still had 2 more years to run of your first term in office. Did you ever consider the possibility of giving him a second term?
Giving him?
A second term?
Well, those matters are the reserve of political parties. Various options were considered, but ultimately it was decided by the UPA that Mrs. Pratibha Patil should be invited to be the candidate on behalf of the UPA.
would he have been happy to continue if it had been offered to him? The impression one has from the press is that he would have been happy, but it wasn't offered, and he wasn't upset that it wasn't offered. But do you think he would have been happy to continue?
I have no knowledge.
Okay. Something else that happened, and this was before you became Prime Minister, it happened in August 2002, virtually days or weeks after President Kalam took over as President, was he insisted on going to Gujarat, even though the Prime Minister of the day, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, was reluctant. Does that suggest to you that there were moments, there were times when President Kalam would push out the boat a little, and that he perhaps ended up expanding and adding to the role of President?
Well, I am not privy to the conversations between Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the President on matters relating to the Gujarat riots, but that communal harmony was one of the founding principles of our Secret Republic, was something which he talked about to me, and that's a heritage we must preserve.
So he, as an individual and as President, was deeply concerned about communal harmony in India and also relations between the different communities.
That's right.
And he often spoke to you about this.
He often spoke to me, but he didn't cross the limits in giving public expression to his feelings on some of these issues.
So he was, in a very real sense, a stickler for the proprieties. He would speak freely to his Prime Minister behind closed doors in private, but none of that was reflected in public.
Karan, I always felt that in the President, I had a great friend, an advisor, and a philosopher. And my overall recollection of my dealings with President Kalam is that those were the happiest moments I spent in his company.
That's a very important and a very telling phrase you use. The happiest moments were spent in his company. And you call him a friend, philosopher, and guide.
That's right.
So in fact, the two of you were very close, far more than the world outside ever realized.
Partly because we both came from a background which was different from the normal background of people in politics. And he respected me enormously for that.
Did you have commonalities in terms of your general political philosophy and thinking, given that you both came from non-political backgrounds?
It's difficult for me to dwell on that theme because there are many issues that I discussed, but I was not able to make up whether that is violation of the norms that should guide the relationship between the President and the Prime Minister. But I, for one, was always very happy when President Kalam asked me on any question. I was open to him. I used to share with him whatever inner thoughts I had at times. I needed his advice. He was always forthcoming with his advice. I didn't feel that that was something which was not necessary.
Did he have a very probing mind? Did he inquire deeply into issues? Did you get the feeling that he had done some research and knew what he was talking about, rather than just being curious?
Well, at times I did feel, I think, that he had done a lot of homework. And overall, my impression is that whenever he made up his mind, it was on the basis of detailed examination of issues.
I get the impression he was a very hard-working, dedicated president.
Yes, he was a very hard-working, dedicated president who took his office enormously seriously.
And therefore, there was no question of you ever saying to yourself, he doesn't quite know what he's talking about. There was no question of him ever being dilatory in performance of his duties.
I never got that feeling.
Now, he was, as I said a moment ago, India's first truly non-political president. Has he set a precedent that perhaps we should have more such people in that high office?
Well, I can't say that. I think in the future, what type of people will occupy the high office. I think that's for the political establishment of the country to reflect and to take decisions.
But certainly his behavior, his performance as president would mean that the first non-political appointee did superlatively well.
That's true.
How do you think history will remember President Kalam, the president?
History will remember him as a great president, a great nation builder, a person who did a lot to promote the cause of self-reliance in defense technologies. So overall, the judgment of history will be that in Kalam, India had a great president. In his death, we have lost a great son of India, a great patriot, a great human being.
Would he count as one of the greatest presidents we've had?
Well, I think those sorts of judgments, I am not privileged or competent to. I would hate to compare various presidents. That's not something which I am competent to do so.
I want to talk, Dr. Manmohan Singh, a little about the Abdul Kalam you knew before he came president, because as you said a moment ago, you've known him from the mid-70s, you knew him for some 25 years. How would you assess his contribution to the development of Indian missile technology, to the functioning of the DRDO?
Well, he was in many ways a major father figure in the development of space technologies. Subsequently, he moved to the DRDO and the development of Brahmo missiles, in the development of Agni and Prithvi missile. His role was phenomenal.
So would it be accurate to describe him as the architect of India's missile technology, or is that exaggerated?
That's quite correct.
That's quite correct.
That's quite correct.
And what about his years as chief scientific advisor to the government, as the head of the DRDO?
Well,
how would you assess those?
But I'm sorry, as finance minister, I had no, I think, way of observing his performance. As the chief of the defense scientific establishment, I wouldn't be able to assess his work in that capacity.
Let's talk a little about Dr. Abdul Kalam, the individual. You knew him for 25 years. From the outside, he seemed always friendly, informal, caring. How did you find him as an individual?
Well, I think caring president, a president who was very fond of meeting with the children, who wanted to see science and technology truly playing their part in the development of our country. That's the image that I have of Dr. Abdul Kalam.
In fact, he's the only other Indian political leader, if I can use that term, apart from Jawaharlal Nehru, who developed a special affinity with young India and with children in particular. What was it about him that made children and the young feel so close to him?
His concern for the growth of children, his concern that India should grow at a fast pace to provide new opportunities for our young people. I think these were aspirations which caught the imagination of our people.
Many young people found him inspiring. Would you agree with that? That he had this capacity to inspire people?
That's entirely true.
And one of the most famous things he said was that before you can hope for your dreams to come true, you must start to dream.
That's true, I think. Aspiration, as Robert Louis Stevenson said, is a joy forever. So if you don't aspire, you're not likely to achieve much also.
The other side of Dr. Kalam was that he was a very cultural man. He played the veena. He was very sensitive and very well informed and educated about classical music. he was a vegetarian.
I knew that he was a vegetarian. I also knew that he was fond of Veena, but this other aspect of his personality, I do not have detailed knowledge or experience.
But were these issues and subjects that he talked about knowledgeably, or did you not have that opportunity?
Well, science and spirituality, he used to talk a great deal. That India's ancient heritage has to be taken into account in developing a profile for the future. Overall, that's the impression that he left on me.
It's a very interesting combination. Science on the one hand, spirituality on the other. There are very few people who bridge and combine the two. The fact that he did, and he did it so easily and so effortlessly.
Effortlessly, that's correct.
Does that make him, in a sense, a sort of unique type of person?
Well, he was in many ways a unique type of person.
Was he fascinating to listen to? Because he gave the impression when you saw him on stage that he was a great raconteur with a great facility to speak. Was that what he was like?
That's correct.
So you would sit quite often spellbound by him?
Yes, I think there is no doubt about that. His sincerity, his vision, I think both were so patently clear and obvious in all his speeches.
Now, he's had an incredible impact after his death, not just on political India, but on the Aam Aadmi. Are you slightly surprised by the sweep of emotion that's literally flooded the country?
But Dr. Kalam was the darling of the young people, the student communities, the children and women in our country, all the oppressed segments of our society. I think that was well known, and he had, I think, established that reputation even before his death.
He was, as you said, a very close friend, a philosopher, a guide, a man that you deeply trusted. His death, and it happened very suddenly, very surprisingly, when he seemed in the prime of health, must have come as a terrible shock to you.
Yes, I was very surprised when I learned that as he rose to deliver his lecture at the Shillong Indian Institute of Management, within 5 minutes he collapsed. I think one must be spiritually very, I think, what should I say? To go from this world in that manner is also a unique experience.
It's almost a sign of some divine beneficence that he went painlessly in the company of those he liked most, children, doing what he wanted most to teach.
Correct.
In other words, he would have liked the way he died.
That's very true. He was a great teacher, and he died while he was lecturing to a group of young men and young women in Shillong.
Dr. Manmohan Singh, I want to thank you for having broken a whole year's silence to speak today about Dr. Kalam, and to permit me to include in it a few questions about your political relationship, which you have answered, not just candidly, but I think very importantly, particularly when you made it clear that it was a canard that Dr. Kalam did not want Sonia Gandhi's Prime Minister, and secondly, when you brought out the very critical and important role he played in both encouraging you with the Indo-US nuclear deal and helping persuade people like Mulayam Singh to support it rather than vote against it. I hope hereafter you will be willing to do more interviews, to speak more reflectively.
Let's keep that hope alive.
Absolutely. When you keep a hope alive, there's always hope that one day you will say yes. A pleasure talking to you, sir.